We grieve because we love. We heal because we find hope. And connecting with a sense of wonder in nature when we are grieving can soothe our heart and soul. How do we find hope in healing in the midst of challenges and in the face of so much loss? The way my hands react to the cold in winter is a useful metaphor to explain grief. Whenever I go outside when it's very cold, the tips of my fingers go numb and begin to hurt. When I come inside and they begin to warm up, they hurt even more for a while, until the pain gradually begins to soften and dissipate. Grief is kind of like that. When a loss happens, we can become numb because it hurts our heart to feel. We can even close off our heart. When the numbness begins to lift and we begin to realize the truth of the loss, the pain is often worse. It's as if our hearts are starting to warm up, and the initial feelings are much more painful, perhaps, than we even realized. When our hands are numb and cold, it is good for them to warm up. And when our hearts begin to feel the pain of loss, it is also good for our hearts to warm up and open. What can help our hurting hearts at this time? A listening ear, sharing memories, a good cry, a song with special meaning. This is when I turn to nature and wonder. When I was 13 and my father died, a favorite poem of mine was the first verse of this one by Emily Dickinson. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. I would repeat it often as I turned to nature in my own backyard for solace and for healing. Intuitively, I knew to close my eyes and listen to the birds. The red cardinals were my favorites. The bird song was balm to my hurting heart, and ever since is a gift I wait for at the beginning of each spring. The maple tree in my childhood backyard was the recipient of many salty tears, its trunk a sturdy backrest while I wrote in my journal. Nature is a place of hope for me and for many others. If you watch the way the seasons change, you will find it there. Surely hope is at play when the leaves on the trees fall to the ground in autumn, with an innate trust that the tree will bud again in spring. And as many plants stand in winter bareness or disappear in the dark soil, I can imagine hope within them to bud and sprout again. A single seed contains so much possibility and so much hope. It gets planted in the darkness often for quite a while before something shifts and it begins to transform and make its way toward the light and the sun. These metaphors can be helpful for the griever. To feel themselves deep in the darkness like a seed, and in their own time allow mourning and feeling the depth of their emotions to warm the heart and open like a newly sprouting plant. When I first read H is for Hawk by Helen MacDonald, I was struck by how the author's relationship with the goshawk named Mabel eventually brought her to face the grief for her father and helped her cope with the loss until she was ready to live her life again. She was profoundly changed by her relationship with Mabel. H is for hawk, and H is for hope, and hope can be the thing with feathers. When it comes to grief, hope is a good word. Many who are grieving feel hopeless. Helping a person who is grieving find hope is a beautiful thing. Hope helps warm the heart and helps a person rediscover purpose and meaning in life. Alan Wolfelt, one of my favorite experts on grief, writes in the Mourner's Book of Hope that hope is the expectation of the good that is yet to be. He says that to integrate loss and to move forward with a life of meaning and love, you must have hope. I often write nature prescriptions for my clients. Take a 10-minute walk once a day to look for signs of hope in nature. Stand with your back against a tree and feel its steady support. Walk or sit at the beach, close your eyes, and listen to the waves. In your imagination, allow them to wash over you, soothing your soul. John Burroughs, an American naturalist, said, "I go to nature to be soothed and healed and to have my senses put in order." For me, having my senses put in order is a great way to describe wonder. Rachel Carson, a biologist and conservationist, invited us in her classic book, The Sense of Wonder, to look at the world through a child's eyes. I pass this wisdom on to my clients when I prescribe wonder walks. I invite them to step out their door and discover the nature right around their home, as if seeing it for the first time with a sense of childlike discovery. They often kick their shoes off and literally allow their skin to connect with the earth. I invite them to find a flower or a plant and look as closely as they can at it, noticing every detail, the shape and the smell of it. You might be wondering what all this wandering in nature really has to do with grief. Thanks to many studies and books on nature, therapy, and forced bathing, and grieving, we now know that this connection to nature is stress-reducing, increases oxytocin, and relaxes the nervous system. And it is a healing modality that you can feel the effects of immediately. It's hard not to be altered by gazing at the full moonlight, or watching the sunset, or simply standing in a forest as the light streams through the trees. And nature is big enough to hold your grief. A client of mine walked the beach daily after his wife died, initially screaming and crying into the wind, gradually crying more softly, until eventually he heard a voice on the waves that he recognized as his wife's, and she told him that all would be well for him. Another client of mine finds wonder and solace whenever she visits her horse. The last thing that she and her husband did together before his tragic death was ride their horses. Initially, it was hard for her to get back to them. But once she did, the horses worked their healing magic, offering her their soft noses and understanding eyes. She rode her horse and remembered her husband and cried. Visiting the horses became a source of sweet memories and comfort for her. Yet another client has a tree that she visits whenever she needs support. She talks to the tree, leans up against it, cries, writes in her journal underneath it, and listens to its wisdom when she asks a question. When I was a little girl, my father and I would laugh and play in the backyard. One of my favorite activities with him was making mud pies with a little easy bake oven and some kitchen dishes. I would mix just the right amount of dirt with water to make them moist, like little devil's food cakes. And my father would pretend to eat them, laughing with delight and exclaiming about how delicious the little round chocolatey mud pies tasted. In the months after his death, with no one to talk to, I returned to the backyard to make those round and moist mud pies. This time they had a special ingredient, my grief tears. I would offer the mud pies up to the trees and to the sky and close my eyes and pretend that I could hear his laughter. What I have come to learn through my own healing and the healing stories and healing experiences of my clients is that after allowing space for our feelings and finding genuine support, reconnecting with a sense of wonder and the beauty of nature can heal us when we are grieving. Does nature play a role in giving you insight, wisdom, and comfort? Can you imagine how it might be helpful if you're grieving to take those big feelings into nature and be held by the beauty of the world and even by the fragmentation of the world? Perhaps the fragmentation mirrors our own disconnection from our feelings, or a wounded place on the earth may stir up compassion for the earth and for our own wounds. Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his 1836 essay, Nature, said, "I feel that nothing can befall me in life which nature cannot repair. In my home, I look at the sun streaming through the window and onto my writing desk. As I turn my head, I see the chickadees gathering suet to take back to the nest, perhaps for themselves or for their young, hopeful ones, waiting not so patiently for their next meal. Hope can be as fragile as a small bird's wings, but if we trust in it, it will take us where we need to go to find healing. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul." Thank you.